The Valley Current.
Hey, David, you're in your writer's studio there, right, in the country.
Right.
I know, it's amazing. That's where all those words come from. You're done with your trilogy now.
The other two books were the primers, and this is the big book, right? The methodology, how they're going to all live together, you know.
Well, that'll be the fourth book, right? That'll be the fourth.
That'll be the third.
That'll be the third. Okay.
Yeah. Book 3 is actually written. It's called Maine. It's all written. But in order to do that, I have to write this. This is called Methuen's Way. Can you see that?
Yeah, is that book 5?
4. That's 4.
Book 4. Okay.
Yeah. And then book 5 is the augmented world, the augmented society. But you know, all this fictional writing has been about books 4 and 5. But you know, I had to create this world. So, for example, this is the hub.
That was the original conception of the series right there?
Yeah. This is what they're gonna. You never see that constructed in the book series, but that's what they're aiming for. But I have to build all those.
That graphic that you had, you put it together with little circular paper plates. Did I get that right?
I wish I was talented enough to be able to do it graphically, digitally, but I do it with one of these things. I cut a pair of scissors.
Yeah, right. I remember those. There used to be people in New York City that had these little push carts that did scissor sharpening and knife sharpening.
Yeah.
And they have push carts with the guy that would come with the fruit and vegetable, and the fish man would come with the fruit cart with the fish.
But I'll tell you what, Jack, we could do with some of those people around nowadays, because I do a lot of cooking and stuff, and finding a good tool to sharpen my knives is really tough.
Well, they're actually still around. You know, you sometimes see them. They have now actual vans, and the vans go around to different. Now the way they do it is they go around to different farmers markets where people are strolling up and down the booths, and they drop off their knives, and then at the end of the day, they pick up their knives and they're sharpened. Of course, my dad was a butcher. So you probably didn't know this. My dad started life after the Navy as a butcher. He went to butcher school in Ohio.
Oh, seriously?
And he used to sharpen his own knives. And he had all the sharpening stones. He had the sharpening belts. He had everything.
Yeah. I know, Jack. I've tried to do it myself. I have a friend who is a butcher, young guy, and whenever you see him in his shop, he's just sharpening knives all the time.
All the time, right? Well, you have to have a sharp tool.
I can't do it. I can't. I find it really difficult to do and do well. So I bought all this equipment and stuff, but it still doesn't work. But anyway, sharpening knives it's an old trade, but it's actually really still important if you're cooking.
It's still relevant from a metaphor point of view, because what did Lincoln say? If I had a certain amount of time, I would use 9/10 of the time to sharpen the axe, and 1/10 of the time to actually swing it. There's some saying like that. I'll find it at some point. But you did this graphic. I'm kind of interested in the graphic because, of course, you could take a photograph of that graphic.
Yeah. And
then you could move it into one of these systems, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude or Meta, or there's 7 that are competing right now. Perplexity. They're all multi-billion-dollar, maybe soon to be trillion-dollar companies. It's amazing, the valuations. They will actually do a conversion and give you a very refined graphic that you can manipulate on a screen. So you could take that rough drawing, take a photograph of it. Conceptually, every time you do a hand drawing or a hand graphic, you could take a picture of it just with your iPhone, and then move the picture in as an attachment, and then ask it with the right prompt to turn that attachment into a line drawing, turn that attachment into some type of graphic that you can move into Adobe. So this whole area of professional graphics is changing dramatically.
Yeah.
And I'm really amazed that you did that hand drawing. It looked like you pasted together a bunch of little circular plates.
Yeah, yeah. I still believe it's a bit like writing. You can get ChatGPT to do a lot of writing for you, but you still have to have the ideas.
You have to have the
yourself.
ideas. You have to have the ideas, and you have to have the ideas in the right sequence, and you have to have the ideas with the right structure.
Yeah.
I mean, most of brief writing, I've been doing brief writing forever, and I've actually got an appellate specialization, which is like 0.1% of lawyers in the world actually go out and do all the exams and to prove that you're competent or beyond competent specialist. And I say to everyone I teach legal writing to, including the people in my firm, spend the time thinking about the structure and the organization, because that's what's going to communicate. The actual writing is almost secondary or tertiary to the whole story.
And it's the same with the image as well.
Show me that graphic again, because I want to make sure I'm not hallucinating. It looked like you had little circular plates, right?
Yeah.
You had little circular plates. Yeah, like little circular plates and a big circle in the middle. And you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 circular plates around
everything's in 8.
Right?
This from here to here.
Yes.
This area, I should say, is about 4 times the size of London.
Okay.
It's 5,000 square kilometers, and that's the hub. That's the hub they're going to build. And then you have on the hub, you have the central hub here, you have the central piece here, but then you have these things called clusters, and then the clusters are broken down into towns. The towns are broken into villages, and villages are broken into hamlets, and you get a million people on that, but with a density of population which is 1/5 of London.
Right. I mean, you're defining a future community that gets established after whatever event causes it.
No, they start building it in 2051, and there are 9 of these. They're interoceanic. So get this: as the water flows between these are very big structures sitting on this bigger structure. As the water flows between here, that's tidal generation. And when you do the math on that, that can generate all the power you ever need. You do not need solar. Oh, look. Oh, I see what I'm showing you now.
I want to put the whole picture in just to remember.
Yeah. You don't need solar. You don't need turbines. You certainly don't need fossil, because the going between here, there is so much power with the wave, with the different levels of the sea, that generates the own power. And I've done the math on that. It's pretty good.
So you think you've got a real design here that's not just fictional, is what I'm hearing, right?
I mustn't make it make believe. I've got to make it plausible. Even though the story has got a fictional element to it, everything you try to do has got to be plausible. Otherwise, I'll lose my readers.
Right. I mean, what we're talking about, just for the purpose of underscoring this, we're really talking about your 2 books that already have been published, right? There's 2, right?
This is the primer.
The Path to Phillips K. And you also have the second book, which is on Phillips K.
Yeah. So now,
second book.
This is the primer that gets you up to 2050. And then I'll go introduce the community, which I did in the last book.
That's right.
But this is all preparation stuff. What you're really looking at is so many bits of paper here. I can't find what I'm looking for. What you're actually looking for is the next steps. And what happens is everyone go for an expedition on Maine, and Maine is the gigantic island next door. Let me just show you.
But let me pause you for a second, because I asked you this question once before.
Yeah.
You chose this name, Phillips K.
Key.
Yeah, C-A-Y.
Yeah, think of the keys.
And I thought to myself, the first thing I thought of was the company named Phillips. There's a company that thinks it has a famous name called Phillips, right? And I was trying to figure out why you chose Phillips as the name, because it's in both the first book and the second book, right?
Yeah, because they were a family. that went across in the 16th, 17th century to the Caribbean and bought up a load of the islands.
Oh, I didn't know that. This is part of a true story then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not admitting that because there may be all sorts of, but I'm using that one. I'm not using the proper name that this island is based on. So have a look at this.
So there actually is an island that you have in mind.
Absolutely.
That has a different name.
Well, it's an island I've lived on for 2 weeks.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. No, I lived there in isolation for 2 weeks.
Recently?
No, 2004.
So in 2004, you lived on an island that was located where? In the South Pacific?
No, I'm not telling you, but it's in the Caribbean.
You're not telling me. That's right. It's got to remain secret. That's right.
Yeah, I think it's probably a good idea.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
There for 2 weeks, and we had a big storm, and I met some of the characters that are in the book are actual characters that were there because we were all isolated because a big storm came over. So yeah, and sitting next to it is quite a large island, but I've made the island much bigger. And I don't know if you can see this because it's a bit big. This is a map. Phillips Key is just this little island here. And this is the gigantic island, which is called Maine.
Is that a real thing or fictional thing as well?
There is something there.
Okay.
There is, but it's nowhere near as big as this.
Okay.
And what they're doing there, Jack, is they're walking up an abandoned airstrip in Maine. That abandoned airstrip does actually exist, but the rest of it is fiction.
So that's interesting. See, so you got the kernel for this idea sometime in the early 2000s as you're sitting in this island.
Yeah.
And you're observing different people. Are you making notes? Are you writing little notes to yourself about, I got to talk about this personality and that personality?
No, I got divorced. That was the big issue.
There you go. That'll do it.
And I was on a plane like 6 times a year to Japan. I had my offices in London. And that centralized. And then I met Jeanette, who's just downstairs here, and Jeanette had done a lot of writing in theater and stuff like that. And we went away on our original first holiday, and I gave her some of her writing. She said, "Hey, you can write dialogue." And I never knew I could write. So that was the incentive.
Right. Let me just pause you here because, you write dialogue really well. I've loved both of your books. I've loved both of your books, and I've listened to both of your books on Audible, which is a fantastic listen. Highly recommended.
That's a real compliment.
But I need to say this. I need to say this because we met in Spain at a writer's workshop that you probably should have been co-teaching. You were there because Jeanette was there, and you were doing your own writing while you were there.
Yeah.
And Frances Wilson led the group. Frances Wilson, she's extremely well educated. And she admitted during the discussion, and she admits publicly, she can't write dialogue for some reason.
Yeah.
Do you remember hearing that from her?
No, but I met Frances in 2016.
Right.
And I was still not published at that stage. And she said exactly that to me. She said, not only could she not write dialogue, she said, I don't think I can build up fictional plots and things. When I was in Trasiera, I wrote that, and
I remember that. Mm-hmm.
I got to tell you, Jack, I was really incentivized by your comments that day.
Excellent!
When you saw that, you said, "Oh, I enjoyed that," because you never know when you're writing these blogs, and it was your comment that really put me on cloud 9 for a few days. So thanks for that.
That's good. That's good.
Have a look at this, Jack.
Yeah.
Now, you know that big diagram I showed you of the hub?
Yes.
Well, I discovered people have started thinking like that. And this is an artist who started drawing, but I cannot track the individual down. Because what I want to...
So you do a photograph of that and send it to me. We'll put it through a search engine to find the author, to find the architect. Yes. That's where this AI stuff is going. It's becoming like a magnificent extension of your brain.
But you're so fucking ahead of us, you guys. It really
no, we're not that far ahead.
No, you are. Okay, so last week I was on jury service
Right.
and it was totally aborted and fuck up and everything. But I sat next to a blind guy,
Right.
and he's only 24 years old, and he was absolutely amazing. He was completely into this AI stuff. You know what he was doing. He was like reading like this because he's 1%, 99% blind.
Right.
But he did the same as you. He said, "Oh no, there's loads of stuff available." But the more I asked him about it, he kept referring to people abroad that you have to go to. In the UK at the moment, it's still not mainstream, and I can see that I'm really missing out. Or I got so many ideas how it could be used, and you've just given me a few more now.
It's so contradictory that the UK is not teaching all of its citizens, because DeepMind started in London, in the UK, which is the originator of all this stuff, came out of DeepMind.
He lives just down the road.
Right.
I'm in Notting Hill. He's living over in Kensington. Yeah, but it's also partly my fault as well. Let's face it. But I'll think really seriously about that. And the other thing I want to think seriously about, now that you've started the conversation, is that image was created using what they call DALL-E, which is the chatbot image.
Right.
And I'm so pleased with it. It's perfect for me for the front cover of my book. But then I could not reproduce it with DALL-E. And no matter how I tried, because there's a double line of trees here, which is stupid. But I'm so happy with it and I'm fixed on it. But then, amazingly, I went back to DALL-E about a week ago and they've deleted my history.
Yes.
And so
they do that.
Really crazy. And so I've got the dialogue, some of the dialogue for it, but what I really want to do, talking about scanning, is to scan that in and then modify it in the way I want it, because this is the front cover of book 3. It's going to be. And I just what I want to do is get it into good shape and then hand it to my graphics guy who produces the covers. But again, if you say I could scan that, I've got the digital image of that.
Yes.
If I scan it, would I then be able to play around with it?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yes, easily. But I have to ask you about the name for a second, because, The Path to Phillips K is a great book.
Yeah.
On Phillips K is the second in the series, and that's a great book.
Yeah.
Why aren't you going with something like Beyond Phillips K instead of the word Maine?
Yeah.
It's not attached. Like, to me, my head works. On, basically path to, on, and then now you're launching to Beyond.
Yeah.
I think it's Beyond. And when I think of the word Maine, of course, I think of like Main Street, and I think of other things. And Phillips K, I have to say, Phillips K, I'm mispronouncing, Phillips Key.
Yeah.
It's like your brand. It sort of like becomes your brand. It sort of becomes the thing that people remember. Now, you also have a fourth book, which is Methuen,'s Way, right?
That's
being drafted, and Methuen plays a big role as a character. And you're going to talk about his way, which I guess sounds like his philosophy, right? Is what it sounds like.
It's the way if you take a bunch of people in a world of 2050, which is really in bad shape, and you put them on an island, the island has got new infrastructure, you can build whatever society you want, but the minds of the individuals are still locked into the old society.
Right.
You've got to find the way. Methven's way is the way in which you change their minds, change their minds towards greater cooperation. And that isn't done in the way you may think. But to give you a hint, I'm an Aristotelian, and I always have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I find increasingly Aristotle, you go back to him time and time again, and he's got the roots of everything which is correct, equally the roots of everything that is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So Methven's way, I confess to you, this is a spoiler in a way, but you keep it yourself, has got a big Aristotelian element to it. But I've got that problem. You're absolutely right. Nice for continuity to have the words Phillips Key on that.
Right. Yes.
I will think about it. But books 4 and 5, then what do you do with 4 and 5 when you go Methuen's Way? And then the final one is called The Augmented Society, where Katerina we're 5 or 6 years on. Katerina is embedded, and everybody is working with a Katerina in their head, and that is a philosophical thinking exercise which I haven't attempted yet. So, well, I have, but I haven't.
Well, you are actually way ahead of most people in Silicon Valley with what you're writing, because in truth, Zuckerberg is trying to deliver the message that you just delivered. You delivered a message that said the philosophy of mind and the thought process changes when you have a super intelligent assistant always available. Katerina is that super intelligent assistant, always available on a moment's notice with no typing. You just dictate to her. You just talk to her.
She's
right?
here. So just as you're talking to me, I could be Katerina now.
Right.
Except that if I were Katerina, I would be there to assist you, not insist.
Right. Right. Now Zuckerberg is trying to communicate that, and what he uses is this idea that you're going to have an avatar, which is like a projection of yourself. And you're talking to yourself. Now, Katerina is not identically you.
No, but Jack, what Zuckerberg's trying to create is what Methuen created in the late 2020s. It's called the Segmented World Virtual Reality Program, SWVRP. And I wrote that 10 years ago, that story. But when Zuckerberg came up with Meta and the Meta Virtual World, I was absolutely bloody delighted, because at least somebody is trying to do that. And Methuen achieves that, but he achieves it for a good reason, so that you can talk to your avatar and to try to understand the world you're in. But when you go to Katerina, everything is different, because Katerina is a super brain. She as you will have read book 2, she admits in book 2, she is not human intelligence, she is machine intelligence, but it's pretty bloody good. But what you've got to think about is one really important thing. If this could be allowed to happen, right? And this is what happens on the Phillips Key augmented society. There is no hidden information. Knowledge is no longer power, because knowledge is available to everyone. And anyone who wants to know something can know it. Now, they may choose not to, but that's their decision. However, even if they choose not to know it, Katerina is there knowing they haven't asked about that piece of information, and maybe gently introducing it.
Right.
So the whole point about power in the world is about knowledge, things that you actually know. And if you could, and what the augmented world is, a world where that power element has been taken out.
Yes, you're the analogy to use. Many years ago, people were like, some people had electricity and some people didn't. The people that had electricity had tremendous power. Now electricity is more or less free. Everyone's got electricity. Almost everyone's got electricity. Not everyone does.
Great analogy. Yeah, I've heard that before, and I think that's a brilliant analogy.
And then once you have electricity, it just flattens what you can do. You can't say, well, I have a competitive advantage. So your point is, well, information and even knowledge and maybe even wisdom is readily available, like a plug going into a circuit for electricity, and it's free, or it's very low cost.
Ask yourself, what does that do to democracy? It's really interesting. It's the most democratizing thing you could imagine. What does it do to government? Do you need a government? Or a government that handles and controls information? You certainly
Let me tell you something. The most advanced version of the corporate thinkers that are thinking about the future of corporations are defining entities that are called DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations.
Yeah.
A DAO is essentially a computer system that's running the company. Like, think of Uber Uber is basically a ginormous computer system that automates the way in which demand is matched against supply of drivers. There's no real group of people that are actually doing what taxi dispatchers used to do. That field is gone. You can't be a dispatcher. You can't be a dispatcher any more than you can be an elevator operator.
That's a great story. I've heard of these DAOs, but now take a DAO, Jack. 30 years forward.
Yes.
Imagine what it can do. All the, there's this thing called bullshit jobs. You've heard that phrase.
Yes.
That's phrase by David, this guy who died, the anthropologist who died not long ago, and Musk has used the phrase as well. But the so-called bullshit jobs, the manual jobs, will to a large extent disappear. But it's more than that. I mean, even your own profession.
Yes.
Will be disseminated. The knowledge will be there.
Yes.
Innovations and things like that will be there for creative people, but much of it will be disseminated. And it'll be, the interface will be what? It'll be Katerina in your head saying, look, there's something wrong with your blood pressure, mate. You've got to go and do something about it.
Right.
If you do that, you're going to get yourself into a bit of legal trouble. This is it isn't to say you've got to do this. You can ignore me. She allows you to go and do crazy things. But she is there, and everyone knows that she did inform you. That's the other trick. People can say, well, I didn't know. You say, no, that's not true.
Right.
You have Katerina. You did know.
Yes.
So you chose not to know.
Yes.
And what I'm thinking, this is book 5 we're talking now. What I'm thinking through in book 5 is just to get that in my head and play out the characters that I introduce you to in books 1 and 2, who by the time you're in book 3, by the time you're in book 4, you really know these son of the bitches, yeah? And suddenly they have a Katerina in their head, and you know them, you know their characters, and suddenly they're doing different things.
Right.
One example is Harvey, who's the late 70-year-old guy, he's early 80s. And his relationship with Esther, the Jewish guy, people, and I absolutely love them, the characters. I never rated the characters. The relationship with Esther is bad. It's not a good marriage.
Right.
And I've written some of book 5, of course. Harvey falls in love. Sort of. Because he makes the case to Methuen. He said, look, I have Katerina. She cares for me. She takes interest. Recently, she compiled an album of my dead brother, and she brought it to me. And she talked so kindly. He said, I've always wanted someone like this. And so, there's these type of things that I've got to explore for book 5. But it's out there, Jack. It's 2028, 2029, 2030. Right. The better thinking I've got to do before I get there on the other 2 books, enormous. But it's fantastic talking to you because you've got
let me ask you, you just showed me a potential cover for book 5. What was on that cover? The one that was out there in draft form. What was that? Not Maine. No, you have Methuen's Way. Maine is number 3. I call Maine Beyond Phillips Key. I just renamed it for you, but you can ignore that. You can ignore that. And then Methuen's Way, I think of as the subtitle is what we learned or what he learned from Phillips Key. That's what I think.
There's Methuen.
That's Methuen's Way, right? Yeah. And that's an image that you generated on DALL-E as well?
I did. And I lost it. No.
And then wasn't there another one for book 5? Wasn't there another one hanging up there for book 5?
If you want to start using your magic, that is book 5.
Oh, the Augmented Society. Okay, the Augmented, because I wanted to say something. When I heard the Augmented Society, I have to get this in because this occurred to me and I didn't get a chance to say it. And this is really good. There is actually one tax haven left in the United States, in the world, actually in the world of U.S. taxpayers, where you have some connection with the U.S., you're a U.S. taxpayer. There's only one real tax haven left in the entire world. I mean, Cayman Islands competes and a few other places compete, but the actual place is Puerto Rico. And the reason it's Puerto Rico is Puerto Rico cut a deal with the federal government to say, because the island has been battered by storms and huge problems, the economics there are just terrible. They lost the pharmaceutical industry to the Philippines. There's a lot of stories within stories within stories. We have to leave for another day. But there is an actual special set of legislation that says if I move, for example, U.S. citizen, if a U.S. citizen moves to Puerto Rico, you're still a U.S. citizen. You've moved to Puerto Rico, so you left California, Texas, Florida. California's a high tax state. Texas is a no tax state. Florida is a no tax state. New York is like the worst, really high tax state and high tax city. You can leave, you establish a residency, and you establish a business that's doing what's called outbound services, meaning everything is leaving the island in the form of information. It's like establishing a website. That's outbound services. Providing legal services that are outside of Puerto Rico, that's outbound services, right? All of that is not taxed so long as you hire 3 people as your employees, like your support staff. And the price, the hourly rate for these 3 people does not have to be very high. So there are literally multi-millionaires becoming billionaires trading cryptocurrency. That's an outbound service, investing money, doing a bunch of stuff. And they created a society that's called the 2020 Society because the statute that was passed was called, because of the way they number their laws, Law 20 and then Law 2022. So it's called the 2022 or the Law 2022 Society. And what they do is, because they feel they need to do it, they actually give a lot of philanthropic gifts to Puerto Rican groups as a way to say, we're glad to be here because we don't pay any federal taxes anymore. And this is all legit. This is all totally legal. There's no scam here. There's no nothing. You just have to meet the definition of being a resident of Puerto Rico, which typically means you're living there for at least 185 days a year, more than half the year, right? So when you say like the augmented society, I think to myself, if there was a group of Americans that wanted to establish a new community in a tax-free way, because there are a lot of people that leave the United States they give up their citizenship, they have to pay an exit tax. You're not giving up your citizenship. So think about this. Puerto Rico should really have the beginning of the augmented society, at least so far as the U.S. taxpayer is concerned, because some of these people, they make millions of dollars a year. They pay millions of dollars a year in taxes, or they figure out a way to get around it, right?
But Jack, the point, probably the point about this book series is to say we are behaving as human beings on a finite world, which is going to may end earlier rather than later, maybe before 2050. It's going to be a fucking disaster, right?
Well, it's emerging right now. I mean, how many permanent conflict zones do we have at this point that are actively in conflict?
But it's not that. It's the way that the whole capitalist system, and I'm not against capitalism in competition, I am.
Right.
But what happens actually in book 4, even though we talk about Methuen way, which is a way of working and thinking that changes your mind. You just want to be more cooperative.
Right.
But the other thing that's going along in parallel there is a society where the profit motive and money has been removed. There's no such thing as taxation. And immediately you say to me, well, hang on, what's the reward? What's the incentive? And in fact, there is still money, but money can only be spent on certain things. Anything that you spend money on in order to build your status, and that has a negative impact on the planet overall, that doesn't work. But the other thing about reward is you can actually reward people and give them a really warm feeling about themselves if it's a reward within that community. And remember, at the moment, my community is over 100 people, but on that hub, there are 500,000 people. and on the 9 hubs altogether, there's almost 5 million people. So one of the things I have to think through, and I'm working harder. That's what my 6 months research is about at the moment. Is not only how this state of mind changes, but how the economic and financial system can be adjusted in a way that keeps people energized and entrepreneurial and wanting, but they're entrepreneurial for different things. And anything that allows someone to rise above other people in terms of just money, which is meaningless, everybody will rise above one another, or higher or lower, because people have got different talents and they've got different drives.
Right.
But the reward for that, the recognition for that, can come through the community, and it's not wishy-washy, because you'll see it when I'm building it. It's something, but it's a mindset which is almost impossible to. I speak to you about it, but many people I speak to, they go, that'll never happen. We've got to have money.
It's already happening. Let me tell you how it's happening. It's already happening. These days, if you ride in an Uber, the person that does the work is getting paid a certain portion of whatever the total fare is. Yeah. Uber is grabbing a large portion. But that person will say to you, I really hope you give me 5 stars as a way to say, I really did a good job. And they will almost bribe you. They will almost say, here's a free bottle of water. I hope you love the ride. And if you did, of course, they already give you a bottle of water, right? So they've got you juiced up to the fact that you're going to say, yes, please give me 5 stars. And you could argue that getting as close as possible to a perfect score on Uber where it's 5 stars, there'll always be someone that'll say something negative. But people who when they have like 4,000 people that have provided 5 stars, and maybe just a couple of people that provided 1 or 2 or 3, they get brand recognition as a better driver. Yeah. And it has nothing to do with their accident ratio or anything. It's just what people, they may actually not even be good drivers, but they might be good conversationalists. I mean, I was in an Uber the other day. I have to drop this footnote because I want you to read this book. I was in Uber and I was talking about the healthcare system and how broken in the US it is. I know it's also broken, arguably, in London or in England too. There's a lot of commentary. I'm reading in the FT about how it may just collapse, right? I don't know if it's hyperbole or not. And the guy was like, he was a professor. This guy was a professor. He was like so scholarly. He said, well, if you read the book 2030, and I confused it for a second with a book I had just finished. It was called 2032. And I said, were you talking about the book about nuclear war? He said, no, I'm talking about.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this episode of The Valley Current.